Sarah spent the next hour familiarizing herself with the equipment and range conditions. The weapon she would use was a standard military-issue sniper rifle, the same model that Thompson had used to set his record. The rangemasters watched as she methodically checked every component, adjusting the scope and testing the trigger pull with the precision of someone who understood that success would depend on perfect harmony between shooter and weapon. The first target was positioned at 300 yards, which seemed almost insultingly easy to the watching SEALs. Most of them could hit targets at that distance in their sleep. But the rangemasters knew better. This opening shot was designed to be deceptively simple, lulling shooters into overconfidence before the real challenges began. The target itself was smaller than standard, and wind conditions had been carefully monitored to ensure maximum difficulty. As Sarah took her position, the crowd grew larger. News of the record attempt had spread through the base like wildfire, and off-duty personnel were finding excuses to walk past the range. Some came out of genuine curiosity. Others hoped to witness a spectacular failure that would provide entertainment for weeks to come. The atmosphere was thick with skepticism and barely concealed amusement. Commander Hayes stood beside the range master, clipboard in hand, ready to record official scores. He had overseen hundreds of shooting tests during his career, but he had never felt quite this nervous. His reputation was on the line. He had vouched for Sarah's abilities to his superiors, and if she failed spectacularly, he would face questions about his judgment for months to come. Sarah seemed oblivious to the crowd and the pressure. She lay prone behind the rifle, her body positioned with textbook precision. Her breathing was controlled and rhythmic, and her grip on the weapon was firm but relaxed. Those who knew what to look for could see the signs of serious training. The way she naturally fell into position, the automatic pre-shot routine and the calm focus in her eyes. The first shot rang out across the range, sharp and clean. Through their spotting scopes, the observers watched the bullet strike dead center of the target. A few appreciative nods rippled through the crowd, but most remained skeptical. Anyone could get lucky once, and hitting a target at 300 yards was still within the realm of possibility for a skilled civilian shooter. The second target was positioned at 500 yards, and the wind had picked up slightly. This shot separated casual marksmen from serious shooters. Sarah adjusted her scope, calculated the wind drift, and fired. Another perfect center hit. The murmuring in the crowd grew slightly louder, and a few of the SEALs exchanged glances that carried a hint of surprise. Target 3 was where things began to get interesting. Positioned at 700 yards and partially obscured by artificial cover, it required the shooter to thread the bullet through a gap barely larger than the projectile itself. This was the type of shot that had ended many promising shooting careers and had caused even experienced snipers to second-guess themselves. Sarah studied the target through her scope for nearly a minute, calculating angles and accounting for the slight crosswind that had developed. The crowd grew restless during this pause, some interpreting her deliberation as hesitation, others recognizing it as the careful preparation of a serious competitor. When she finally fired, the bullet passed cleanly through the gap and struck the target with precision that made several observers whistle in appreciation. By the fourth target, the atmosphere around the range had changed noticeably. The casual chatter and joking had died down, replaced by focused attention and growing respect. This target was positioned at 800 yards on an elevated platform, requiring Sarah to calculate both distance and elevation changes while accounting for wind conditions that varied at different altitudes. Chief Thompson moved closer to get a better view, his experienced eye studying Sarah's technique and mental approach. He could see qualities in her shooting that reminded him of his own peak performance years: the methodical preparation, the absolute stillness before firing, and most importantly, the complete absence of doubt or hesitation. These were traits that couldn't be taught. They had to be developed through years of dedicated practice and natural ability. The fifth target presented the most technically challenging shot yet. Located at 900 yards behind a series of obstacles that created complex wind patterns, it required not just accuracy, but an intuitive understanding of ballistics that few shooters ever developed. Sarah spent several minutes studying the wind flags positioned along the range, watching how they moved and calculating the bullet's trajectory through The turbulent air. When she fired, the silence that followed was profound. Through their scopes, the observers watched the bullet travel its long arc through the air, seeming to dance between the obstacles before finding its mark with devastating precision. The target monitor confirmed what everyone had seen. Another perfect hit that left the crowd speechless. Commander Hayes found himself holding his breath as he recorded the scores. Sarah was not just matching Thompson's legendary performance. She was exceeding it. Each shot had been executed with a level of precision that bordered on the supernatural, and she still had 5 targets remaining. The record that had stood as a monument to SEAL shooting excellence for over a decade was suddenly looking vulnerable. The watching SEALs were no longer dismissive or amused. They recognized excellence when they saw it, and what they were witnessing was shooting at a level that few people ever achieved. Conversations around the range had shifted from skeptical humor to serious analysis of technique, and wondering where this mysterious civilian had developed such extraordinary skills. Sarah remained completely focused on the task at hand, seemingly unaware of the changing mood around her. Between shots, she would study the next target through her scope, make careful adjustments to her equipment, and prepare for the next challenge with the same methodical approach she had shown from the beginning. There was something almost mechanical about her precision, yet it was clear that every decision was the result of deep knowledge and experience. As she prepared for the 6th shot, even Chief Thompson had to admit that he was watching something special. The woman who had arrived looking like any other tourist was demonstrating shooting skills that rivaled the best military snipers in the world. The question was no longer whether she could compete with his record, but whether she might actually break it. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Naval Special Warfare Training Facility in Coronado, California. Sarah Martinez stepped out of her rental car, adjusting the strap of her canvas bag and squinting against the bright Pacific coast light. To anyone watching, she looked like countless other visitors who came to tour the famous base. Khaki shorts, a simple white t-shirt, and running shoes that had seen better days. Her shoulder-length brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she carried herself with the casual confidence of someone on vacation. What the security guards and personnel around her didn't know was that Sarah had been planning this visit for months. Not as a tourist seeking photo opportunities or military memorabilia, but as someone carrying a secret that could change everything they thought they knew about precision shooting. Sarah had grown up in a small town in Montana, where her grandfather had taught her to shoot when she was just 8 years old. Every weekend they would drive out to their family's ranch, where he had set up targets at various distances across the rolling hills. Her grandfather, a Korean War veteran, had noticed something special about his granddaughter's steady hands and sharp eyes. While other kids her age were struggling to hit barn doors, Sarah was consistently hitting targets the size of dinner plates from hundreds of yards away. By the time she turned 16, Sarah was out shooting grown men at local competitions. Her reputation grew quietly in shooting circles, but she never sought the spotlight. She preferred the solitude of early morning practice sessions and the satisfaction of personal improvement over trophies and recognition. After high school, she had briefly considered military service, but instead chose to pursue a degree in engineering, keeping her shooting skills sharp through weekend competitions and private practice. Now, at 28, Sarah worked as a software engineer for a tech company in Seattle. To her co-workers, she was just another quiet professional who kept to herself. They had no idea that their reserved colleague held multiple unofficial shooting records and had been personally invited to test her skills against some of the most elite marksmen in the world. The invitation had come through a friend of her grandfather's, a retired Navy SEAL named Commander Robert Hayes. Hayes had heard stories about Sarah's abilities and had been skeptical until he witnessed her performance at a private shooting event in Nevada. After watching her consistently hit targets at distances that challenged even experienced military snipers, Hayes knew he had to arrange something special. The SEAL shooting record Sarah was about to challenge had stood for over a decade. It belonged to Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson, a legendary sniper who had served multiple tours in Afghanistan and Iraq. Thompson's record involved hitting 10 consecutive targets at varying distances and conditions, with a combined score that had never been matched by any SEAL candidate or active duty personnel. The record had become something of a legend within the special operations community, spoken about in hushed tones and considered virtually unbreakable. As Sarah walked toward the main building, she noticed the curious glances from personnel around the base. She could see them trying to figure out why a civilian tourist was being escorted toward the restricted training areas. Some of the younger SEALs nudged each other and whispered, probably wondering if she was someone's girlfriend or a VIP guest getting a special tour. Commander Hayes met her at the entrance to the shooting complex. He was a tall, weathered man in his 50s with sharp gray eyes and the kind of presence that commanded immediate respect. Despite knowing about Sarah's abilities, he couldn't help but feel a moment of doubt as he looked at the unassuming young woman standing before him. She looked more like someone who might ask for directions to the gift shop than someone about to attempt one of the most challenging shooting tests ever devised. The shooting complex itself was impressive. Multiple ranges stretched out across the facility, each designed for different types of training and testing. There were short-range precision courses, long-distance sniper ranges, and obstacle courses that combined movement with accurate shooting. The range where Thompson's record had been set was the most challenging of all, a course that tested not just accuracy, but adaptability, mental toughness, and the ability to perform under pressure. As they walked toward the range, Hayes explained the rules and conditions to Sarah. The test would involve shooting at 10 different targets, each presenting unique challenges. Some would be at extreme distances, others would require quick target acquisition, and a few would test her ability to compensate for environmental factors like wind and elevation changes. Each shot would be scored not just on accuracy, but on time and consistency. Sarah listened intently, asking occasional questions about ammunition specifications and environmental conditions. Her calm demeanor impressed Hayes, who had seen many accomplished shooters become nervous when faced with such a challenging test. There was something different about Sarah, a quiet confidence that suggested she had already visualized every aspect of the course in her mind. Word had spread quickly through the base about the unusual visitor and the record attempt. By the time they reached the range, a small crowd of SEALs and instructors had gathered to watch. Most of them were skeptical, having seen their share of civilian shooters who talked a big game but couldn't perform when it mattered. They exchanged knowing looks and quiet bets about how quickly the young woman would wash out. Among the observers was Chief Thompson himself, now an instructor at the facility. He watched with professional interest as Sarah examined the course, layout, and discussed technical details with the range masters. Thompson had set his record during his prime, when he was at the peak of his physical and mental conditioning. He was curious to see how a civilian would handle the pressure and complexity of the challenge that had defined his career. The sixth target marked the halfway point of the challenge, and the pressure in the air was almost tangible. Word had spread beyond the shooting range, and personnel from across the base were finding ways to observe the unprecedented event unfolding before them. Even the base commander had quietly joined the crowd, drawn by reports that a civilian was attempting to break one of their most sacred records. This target was positioned at 1,000 yards, a distance where even small errors in calculation or technique could result in complete misses. The target itself was no larger than a dinner plate, and it sat atop a hill where shifting wind currents created a complex puzzle of ballistic calculations. Many professional snipers had failed at this exact challenge, their shots sailing wide or falling short as they struggled to read the environmental conditions correctly. Sarah took her time studying the target through her scope, watching the grass and flags along the range to gauge wind direction and speed at various points along the bullet's path. The crowd watched in respectful silence as she made minute adjustments to her scope and body position. Her movements were deliberate and confident, showing no signs of the stress that would be overwhelming most shooters at this point. Chief Thompson found himself genuinely impressed by her mental approach. He had seen many talented shooters crumble under pressure at this exact point in the course. The combination of distance, difficulty, and accumulated stress had broken the concentration of countless candidates. Yet Sarah appeared as calm and focused as she had been on the first shot, treating each challenge as an isolated problem to be solved rather than part of an increasingly daunting sequence. When she fired, the bullet seemed to hang in the air for an eternity. Through their spotting scopes, experienced observers tracked its flight path, noting how it curved slightly to compensate for the crosswind before settling into a perfect trajectory toward the distant target. The impact was clean and centered, earning Sarah another maximum score and pushing her performance into territory that few had ever reached. The seventh target introduced a new element of complexity: time pressure. Positioned at 600 yards but partially hidden behind a mechanical barrier that would only expose it for 15 seconds at irregular intervals, this challenge tested not just accuracy, but the ability to perform under acute time stress. Many shooters, who had excelled on the previous targets, found themselves rushing their shots here, sacrificing precision for speed and watching their scores plummet. Sarah observed the target's exposure pattern for several cycles, timing the intervals and noting exactly how long she would have to acquire the target, aim, and fire. Her grandfather had taught her patience in hunting situations where game might only present brief opportunities, and that training served her well now. She positioned herself optimally and waited for the next exposure. When the target appeared, Sarah's response was fluid and automatic. Her rifle swung smoothly to the target, the crosshairs settled with mechanical precision, and she fired with barely a second to spare. The target disappeared behind its barrier, but the electronic scoring system immediately confirmed another perfect hit. The crowd's reaction was audible now, a mixture of amazement and growing excitement as they realized they might be witnessing history in the making. The eighth target was positioned at 850 yards in a location specifically chosen to create optical illusions and depth perception challenges. The target appeared closer than it actually was due to clever positioning and background elements, and many shooters had failed by underestimating the distance and shooting short. Additionally, heat shimmer from the California sun created visual distortion that made precise aiming extremely difficult. Sarah spent considerable time studying this target, recognizing the visual tricks that had been built into its placement. She used her scope's ranging reticle to confirm the actual distance, ignoring the deceptive visual cues that had fooled numerous other shooters. Her shot, when it came, was as precise as all the others, punching through the center of the target with authority that demonstrated complete mastery of both technical skills and mental discipline. By now, the crowd around the range had grown, to include nearly everyone on the base who could find an excuse to be there. Word had reached nearby Marine and Army units, and military personnel from other branches had begun arriving to witness what was shaping up to be a historic performance. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation and growing respect for the quiet civilian who was methodically dismantling one of their most cherished records. Commander Hayes found himself in the unusual position of hoping that one of his own facility's records would be broken. Sarah's performance had been so flawless and professional that he couldn't help but admire her skill and mental toughness. More importantly, he recognized that her success would reflect well on his judgment in arranging this test, and might open doors for new types of training partnerships and civilian expertise integration. The ninth target presented what many considered the most psychologically challenging shot of the entire course. Positioned at only 400 yards, it seemed almost easy, compared to the long-range precision shots that had come before. But this apparent simplicity was deceptive. The target was extremely small, no larger than a silver dollar, and it was mounted on a system that created subtle, unpredictable movement. Many shooters had been undone by this target specifically, because it appeared easier than what they had already accomplished. The psychological letdown after the demanding long-range shots often led to overconfidence and careless mistakes. The small size and slight movement required absolute precision and perfect timing, qualities that could be compromised by even momentary lapses in concentration. Sarah approached this target with the same methodical care she had shown throughout the course. She studied the movement pattern, noting that while it appeared random, there were actually brief moments of relative stillness that provided optimal shooting opportunities. Her experience hunting small, fast-moving game in Montana had prepared her for exactly this type of challenge. When she fired, the small target stopped its movement instantly, struck dead center by her bullet. The electronic scoring system registered another perfect score, and the crowd's reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. Even the most skeptical observers had to acknowledge that they were witnessing shooting at a level that transcended normal expectations. As Sarah prepared for the final shot, the tension around the range was overwhelming. She had matched Thompson's legendary record shot for shot, and now she had the opportunity to not just break the record but to shatter it completely. The final target would determine whether this unassuming tourist would leave the base as just another skilled civilian shooter, or as the new holder of one of the most prestigious shooting records in military history. The final target was a masterpiece of shooting challenge design. Positioned at 200 yards on a hillside that created complex wind patterns, it was partially obscured by vegetation and mounted on a platform that introduced subtle angular complications. The target itself was no larger than a coffee cup, and it was painted in colors that made it difficult to distinguish from the background even through high-powered scopes. This was the shot that had defined Chief Thompson's legendary performance. A decade earlier, his final bullet had struck just off-center, close enough to earn maximum points but not perfect enough to be called a bullseye. That slight imperfection had always haunted him, even as his overall record became the gold standard against which all other shooters were measured. Sarah took nearly 10 minutes to study this final challenge. She observed wind patterns at multiple distances, noted how shadows fell across the target area, and calculated the complex ballistics required to place a bullet precisely where it needed to go. The crowd watched in respectful silence, understanding that they were witnessing the preparation for a shot that would either cement an incredible achievement or provide a dramatic conclusion to an already impressive performance. The mathematical complexity of this shot was staggering. The bullet would travel for nearly 2 seconds through air currents that varied in direction and intensity along its path. It would drop more than 30 feet due to gravity, while simultaneously being pushed sideways by crosswinds that changed every few hundred yards. The angular position of the target meant that even a perfect calculation could be thrown off by tiny variations in the rifle's position or the shooter's technique. Chief Thompson moved to where he could observe Sarah's final preparations. Despite the fact that his record was about to be challenged, he found himself genuinely hoping she would succeed. Her performance had been so flawless and professional that it had earned his complete respect. More than that, he recognized that her success would elevate the entire sport and demonstrate that excellence could come from unexpected places. Sarah made her final adjustments to the rifle scope, fine-tuning the elevation and windage settings. Based on her careful observations of environmental conditions, her breathing remained controlled and steady, showing no signs of the enormous pressure that would be crushing most shooters at this moment. She had entered what sports psychologists call the zone, a state of perfect focus where external distractions fade away and only the task at hand exists. The silence around the range was profound as Sarah settled into her final shooting position. Hundreds of military personnel watched through binoculars and spotting scopes, many of them holding their breath as they awaited the conclusion of this extraordinary performance. Even the base commander had positioned himself where he could observe the shot, recognizing that he might be witnessing a moment that would be talked about for decades to come. Through her scope, Sarah could see the distant target wavering slightly in the heat shimmer rising from the California landscape. The crosshairs of her reticle seemed to dance around the tiny target as she compensated for the rifle's natural movement and her own heartbeat. This was the moment where all her years of training and natural ability would be tested against a challenge that had defeated countless expert marksmen. Her finger found the trigger and applied the slow, steady pressure that her grandfather had taught her decades earlier on the Montana ranch. The rifle's firing pin struck the primer with mechanical precision, igniting the powder charge that would propel the bullet on its long journey toward the distant target. The sharp crack of the gunshot echoed across the range and seemed to hang in the air as hundreds of observers tracked the bullet's invisible flight path. Time seemed suspended as the bullet traveled its ballistic arc through the complex atmospheric conditions. Those with experience could almost visualize its path, rising slightly from the muzzle before beginning its inevitable descent, curving slightly to the right as crosswinds pushed against its flight, then settling into its final trajectory, toward the tiny target more than 2/3 of a mile away. The impact was instantaneous and decisive. Through their scopes, observers saw the target react to the bullet strike with a small puff of dust and debris. The electronic scoring system took several seconds to register and transmit the result, those seconds stretching into what felt like hours for everyone watching. When the score appeared on the display board, the silence around the range erupted into cheers and applause. Sarah had not just hit the final target, she had achieved a perfect bullseye, striking the exact center with precision that exceeded even the most optimistic expectations. Her combined score for all 10 shots was not only higher than Thompson's decade-old record, it was higher than any score that had ever been recorded on this course. Chief Thompson was the first to reach Sarah as she stood up from her shooting position. His weathered face was split by a genuine smile as he extended his hand in congratulation. For a man who had held the record for so long, he showed no bitterness or disappointment, only admiration for a performance that had redefined what was possible in precision shooting. Commander Hayes approached with the official scorecard, his face showing a mixture of pride and amazement. The numbers were undeniable. Sarah had not just broken the old record, she had shattered it completely. Her performance would become the new gold standard, and her story would inspire shooters for generations to come. As word of her achievement spread rapidly through military communication networks, Sarah remained characteristically humble and focused. She carefully cleaned and inspected the rifle she had used, treating the weapon with the same respect and attention to detail she had shown throughout the entire course. To her, this had been simply another shooting challenge, albeit a particularly demanding one. The crowd that had gathered to watch began to disperse, but not before many of the SEALs and other military personnel approached Sarah personally to offer their congratulations and express their admiration for her achievement. These were men and women who understood better than anyone the level of skill and mental toughness required to accomplish what she had just done. As the excitement began to settle and the crowd started to thin, Chief Thompson approached Sarah with obvious curiosity. The question that had been building in everyone's mind throughout her performance could no longer be contained. Where had this unassuming software engineer from Seattle developed shooting skills that surpassed the best military snipers in the world? Sarah's answer came slowly, as if she was deciding how much of her story to share. She explained that her grandfather had been her first and most important teacher, but that was only the beginning. After college, she had quietly sought out some of the most demanding shooting competitions and training opportunities available to civilians. She had traveled to Switzerland to train with Olympic precision shooting coaches, spent time in Scotland, learning from competitive Highland Games marksmen, and had even arranged private instruction with retired military snipers who specialized in extreme long-range shooting. What amazed her listeners was the systematic and scientific approach she had taken to developing her skills. While most recreational shooters focused on equipment and basic technique, Sarah had studied meteorology to better understand wind patterns, taken courses in physics to master ballistics calculations, and even studied psychology to develop the mental discipline required for precision shooting under pressure. Her job as a software engineer had provided both the financial resources and the analytical mindset that made this level of dedication possible. She approached shooting with the same systematic problem-solving methods she used in her programming work, breaking down each challenge into component parts that could be analyzed, understood, and mastered through focused practice. The most surprising revelation came when Sarah mentioned her volunteer work with a veterans organization in Seattle. For the past 3 years, she had been quietly providing free shooting instruction to disabled veterans who were struggling with PTSD and physical injuries. Her work with these veterans had not only refined her teaching abilities, but had also exposed her to advanced military shooting techniques and mental training methods that few civilians ever encountered. Commander Hayes realized that Sarah represented something unique in the shooting world, a civilian who had not only matched military training standards, but had exceeded them by combining the best elements of civilian precision shooting with advanced military techniques and scientific analysis. Her approach was methodical, patient, and incredibly thorough, qualities that were sometimes hard to maintain in military training environments where time constraints and operational demands could limit the depth of skill development. Chief Thompson asked Sarah about her future plans. wondering if she had any interest in formal military service or civilian contractor work with special operations units. Her answer surprised him. She was perfectly content with her civilian career and her volunteer work with veterans. For her, shooting was a personal challenge and a way to serve others, not a path to professional advancement or recognition. Tai, base commander, who had remained to observe the conclusion of this historic event, approached Sarah with an official request. Would she be willing to return to provide advanced marksmanship training to SEAL candidates and instructors? Her unique combination of civilian precision techniques and obvious teaching ability could provide valuable new perspectives on shooting instruction. Sarah considered the request carefully before agreeing to occasional consulting visits with the condition that any compensation would be donated to veterans organizations. She made it clear that her primary commitments remained her regular job and her volunteer work, but she was willing to share her knowledge with military personnel who could benefit from her techniques. As the afternoon progressed, Sarah found herself surrounded by small groups of SEALs and instructors who wanted to understand the specific techniques and mental approaches she used. She patiently explained her methods for reading wind conditions, her approach to calculating complex ballistics, and most importantly, the mental preparation routines that allowed her to maintain perfect focus under pressure. Many of the military personnel were surprised to learn that some of Sarah's most effective techniques had been adapted from completely non-military sources. Her breathing control methods came from yoga and meditation practices, her visual focus techniques were borrowed from competitive archery, and her mental preparation routines incorporated elements from professional athletics and performance psychology. The conversation gradually revealed that Sarah's shooting excellence was not the result of natural talent alone, but rather the product of years of dedicated study and practice that had drawn from the best elements of multiple disciplines. She had created a personalized training system that maximized her natural abilities while systematically addressing every aspect of precision shooting performance. Word of Sarah's achievement was already spreading beyond the naval base. Military shooting instructors from other services were calling to request information about her techniques and background. Competitive shooting organizations were expressing interest in recruiting her for international competitions. Equipment manufacturers wanted to discuss sponsorship opportunities and product development partnerships. Through it all, Sarah remained focused on the fundamentals that had brought her to this moment. She was more interested in discussing the physics of bullet flight and the psychology of performance under pressure than in talking about records or recognition. Her passion was clearly for the technical and mental challenges of shooting itself, rather than for the status or opportunities that her achievement might provide. As the sun began to set over the California coast, Sarah prepared to leave the base where she had accomplished something that would be remembered for decades to come. She packed her simple canvas bag with the same casual efficiency she had shown throughout the day, giving no indication that she had just redefined what was possible in military precision shooting. The personnel who had witnessed her performance knew they had seen something special, not just an exceptional shooting display, but a demonstration of what could be achieved through dedication, systematic preparation, and the kind of quiet excellence that transforms challenges into opportunities for growth and achievement. 6 months after Sarah Martinez shattered the SEAL shooting record, the ripple effects of her achievement were still being felt throughout the military and civilian shooting communities. The quiet software engineer from Seattle had unknowingly sparked a revolution in how precision marksmanship was taught and understood across multiple disciplines. The Naval Special Warfare Command had officially incorporated several of Sarah's techniques into their standard sniper training curriculum. Her systematic approach to environmental analysis and her mental preparation methods were now being taught to SEAL candidates at the basic level, rather than being left as advanced skills to be developed through years of experience. The result was measurably improved performance across all levels of military marksmen. Chief Thompson had become one of Sarah's most vocal advocates, using his position as a senior instructor to promote her innovative teaching methods. He had worked with her to develop a comprehensive training manual that combined traditional military shooting techniques with her civilian precision methods and scientific analysis approaches. The manual was being distributed throughout the special operations community, and had generated interest from allied military forces around the world. Sarah's volunteer work with disabled veterans in Seattle had expanded significantly, supported by donations and equipment provided by impressed military personnel and shooting organizations. Her patient, methodical approach to instruction had proven particularly effective with veterans struggling with PTSD and physical limitations. Many of her students had not only improved their shooting skills, but had found renewed confidence and purpose through the disciplined challenge of precision marksmanship. The scientific community had taken notice of Sarah's achievement as well. Sports psychology researchers were studying her mental preparation techniques. Ballistics experts were analyzing her environmental calculation methods, and equipment manufacturers were incorporating her feedback into next-generation precision shooting systems. Her interdisciplinary approach had opened new avenues for research and development that were benefiting shooters far beyond the military community. Perhaps most surprisingly, Sarah's story had inspired a new generation of civilian precision shooters who were pursuing excellence through the same systematic, scientific approach she had demonstrated. Shooting clubs across the country were reporting increased interest in advanced training programs, and many were specifically requesting instruction in the techniques that Sarah had used to achieve her record-breaking performance. The base at Coronado had established an annual precision shooting competition in Sarah's honor, open to both military and civilian participants. The event attracted top marksmen from around the world and had quickly become one of the most prestigious shooting competitions in existence. Sarah herself served as a judge and instructor at the event, continuing to share her knowledge and passion for precision shooting with new generations of students and competitors. Commander Hayes had been promoted and transferred to a position where he could implement Sarah's training methods across multiple military installations. His decision to arrange Sarah's record attempt had been vindicated beyond his wildest expectations, and he had become a leading advocate for incorporating civilian expertise into military training programs. His success had opened doors for similar partnerships between military units and civilian specialists in various fields. The original shooting record board at the Coronado facility now displayed Sarah's name prominently, but more importantly, it included detailed information about her background and training methods. Visitors to the base learned not just about her achievement, but about the dedication, systematic preparation, and innovative thinking that had made it possible. Her story had become a teaching tool in itself, demonstrating that excellence could come from unexpected sources and unconventional approaches. Sarah continued her regular work as a software engineer, though her employer had become much more supportive of her shooting activities after learning about her historic achievement. She now had flexible scheduling that allowed her to travel occasionally for training seminars and competitive events, while still maintaining her primary career and her commitment to working with veterans. The most satisfying aspect of her post-record life was the steady stream of thank you messages she received from military personnel who had improved their own shooting through techniques they had learned from her training materials. Knowing that her methods were helping to protect service members in combat situations around the world gave her a sense of purpose that transcended any personal recognition or achievement. 2 years after her record-breaking performance, Sarah received an unexpected honor: induction into the Military Marksmanship Hall of Fame, making her the first civilian ever to receive this recognition. At the ceremony, she spoke about the importance of continuous learning, systematic preparation, and the value of combining knowledge from multiple disciplines to achieve excellence. In her acceptance speech, Sarah emphasized that her achievement had been possible only because of the foundation provided by her grandfather's patient teaching, the support of military personnel who had welcomed her into their community, and the inspiration provided by the veterans she worked with in her volunteer activities. She credited her success to the generosity of others who had shared their knowledge and experience with her throughout her journey. The legacy of Sarah's achievement extended far beyond shooting records or training techniques. Her story had demonstrated that expertise could be developed outside traditional institutional structures, that innovation often came from combining knowledge across disciplines, and that excellence was achievable through dedication and systematic effort regardless of one's background or circumstances. Today, the shooting record Sarah set still stands, though several military and civilian marksmen have come close to matching her performance using techniques derived from her training methods. More importantly, her approach to precision shooting has become a standard part of advanced marksmanship education, ensuring that future generations of shooters will benefit from the insights and innovations of the quiet tourist who once walked onto a naval base.